Good morning. Thank you all so much for joining us for this press conference as we announce the introduction of a very important bill that we think will have a tremendously positive impact on children and their families worldwide. The name of the bill is CHIFF, Children in Families First. And the name actually speaks for what this bill is about. It's about recognizing the fundamental truth, and I think universal principle accepted, that children actually belong in families. They're born into families. They should stay in those families where they can. Family preservation is important. But when children are separated from families, we need to do, governments, local government, state government, and federal government, and international organizations, a better job of reconnecting children to families because it's fundamentally important to their welfare and development. I want to begin by thanking my chief co-sponsors, particularly Senator Blunt and Senator Klobuchar, who are with me today, but also to recognize Senator Burr, Senator Gillibrand, Senator Inhofe, Senator Kirk, Senator Shaheen, Senator Warren, and Senator Wicker. 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans from very different parts of the state, representing a broad coalition of and constituencies of America, committed to the idea that we can do a better job here in Washington of connecting children to families. I also want to recognize Kay Granger, Representative Bass from California, Bachman, Bonamici, Franks, Israel, Johnson, Murphy, and Cyrus, all members of the House that are working on a similar piece of legislation, and while it will not be introduced today, is very similar to the bill that we will be introducing today. I also want to acknowledge these organizations that have helped to write this bill and work on this bill because they see such a great need. The National Council for Adoption, the Joint Council on International Children's Services, KidSave, Both Ends Burning, the Christian Alliance for Orphans, the Center for Policy Adoption, the American Academy of Adoption Attorneys, Child Advocacy Program, Harvard Law School, and Saddleback Church Orphan Care Initiatives, one of the largest churches in America. What these organizations and these other House members and senators see is the same thing that the 3 of us see, that the United States government, through the departments that are primarily responsible, are not doing the job that they can do to focus on the fact that children really belong in families. Governments do some things well. Raising children isn't one of them. Parents or a parent or families raise children. And so the CHIFF bill attempts to realign or to refocus attention and resources we're already spending on that basically simple fact. And it does 4 things, and I'm going to turn then it over to Senator Blunt. First of all, CHIFF prioritizes families as a key element of U.S. foreign policy and assistance for children so that every child can have a better chance at a permanent, safe, and nurturing family through family preservation, family reunification, and family creation when necessary through kinship adoption first, domestic adoption second, and international adoption third if all other options for family placement in country have been exhausted. It realigns U.S. department and agencies to support the objectives of the 2012 International Action Plan on Children and Diversity, which is a historic document already authorized by our government, which includes for the first time in American policy the central goal or principle that all children should grow up in families. Now, we would think this would be something we don't have to say, something that everyone knows, but for some reason it is just not reflected in our policies. So in order to get it reflected in our policies, we need it written in the law, and that's what this bill does. Simple, but I think important. And it reallocates a portion, not new spending, but reallocates a portion of existing assistance programs to basically achieve these goals. And finally, it streamlines at a time when taxpayers want us to be more efficient, to streamline. That's what this bill does. Streamlines the role of U.S. government agencies in adoptions so they will be better partners with states, faith-based community, and accredited adoption agencies in their mission to reunite children with families. You know, children today, and I'm going to end with this, are only 1/3 of the world's population today as we speak, but they are 100% of the world's future. It's about time to get our eyes on them, to make sure that they are in families that can love them and nurture them. This effort will save taxpayers billions of dollars over time and heartache, and minimize the heartache around the world. So for children who are orphaned, unparented, help is on the way. We're doing better domestically. Now it's time to do better internationally. And I'm going to call on Senator Blunt for a short word, and then Senator Klobuchar. Both of them are going to have to slip out rather quickly for another meeting, but I'll stay for questions.
Well, it's the best of all worlds. I get to co-sponsor legislation with Mary Landrieu and Amy Klobuchar, and Mary gets to answer all the questions. So, you know, the many things we've done over the years that I've been able to be part of in the Senate in the last 2.5 years that have impacted and discussed and brought light to adoption. I don't think there are any of those issues that Mary Landrieu hasn't been involved in and leading in, and I'm always pleased to work with her and with all the other co-sponsors that Mary's already mentioned. You know, the state government has some significant level of responsibility on adoption and does that well, and local courts do that well. I think some things in this bill encourage further movements in the right direction there, but particularly where it relates to international adoption. The federal government is the government that has to be, at some point, a significant facilitator of making that happen. There are 200 million orphans in the world today, and for 9 straight years, there have been fewer international adoptions by families in the United States than there were the year before, to the point that now we're at 62% lower than we were 9 years ago. So that number was a good point. It's on the way down, 62% lower than 9 years ago. What this bill does in that regard is really a number of things, but 3 of them I wanted to mention. One, it creates a focal point in the Department of State for vulnerable children. It specifically creates an obligation in the State Department to move forward and try to find solutions for vulnerable children. It secondly gives new responsibility to Citizenship and Immigration for processing international adoptions, creates a new set of responsibilities and opportunities for them to do that. And as Senator Landrieu said, we give authority to USAID that they currently don't have, and ability and flexibility to move forward on the 2012 goals that we've already adopted, the 2012 National Action Plan for Children in Adversity. If we could get those 3 things done, these numbers would look differently when we look at them the next time. Again, I'm glad to work with Senator Landrieu. Senator Klobuchar and I have been able to do a number of things together in this area as well, and I know that Mary and I are both glad that she's here.
Thank you. Well, very good. Well, thank you to both of you for your incredible leadership. I have seen Mary Landrieu operate in these adoption arenas, and it's an incredible thing to see. I once said she was a pit bull with Louisiana charm, right? And we have been at meetings where I will not say the country, but literally they talked so circularly you could not figure out. I finally turned to her, I said, "What are they saying?" She said, "This has been going on for years." But she hangs in there to try to make sure that these kids have a home. I'm also so interested in this issue because my state actually has the highest rate of international adoptions in the country. And as a former prosecutor doing that job for 8 years, I also oversaw child protection and was able to see what happened when kids languished in foster care for too long. And one of our major goals was to speed up the time that they would get into permanent homes. And we met that goal of speeding it up by 50% because it just makes such a difference. And here you have these kids internationally that so often have families that want them in America, and they wait and wait and wait. And our policy, as Mary has pointed out and as Roy has pointed out, too often has been focused not on this priority of getting these kids into a family. And that's why I'm so excited about this bill. As you can see, we have work to do. We have had a lot of success in the adoption area on a bipartisan basis. We were able to change the law, a bill that I worked on with Senator Inhofe and Senator Sessions, to allow older siblings to come in once a kid had been adopted. And in the light of everything going on during some tumultuous times, we actually passed that bill, and that's what gives me hope for this bill, because there's such bipartisan support for adoption and for prioritizing a family environment for these kids. So I just want to thank Mary for her leadership and for her willingness to take every single question about this bill and anything else you want to ask her. Just kidding.
Thank you, Amy. Don't we
All
love
right.
Amy
Okay.
Klobuchar?
Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you all.
Mary. Good
Thank
job.
you.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, happy to take any questions. Yes, sir.
Some of the parents I've interviewed who've had difficulties in their international adoptions have told me that a lot of the problems they had was with the State Department, and then when it moved to immigration, things got a lot smoother. So how are you confident that leaving it in the State Department, things will become smoother? And was there any consideration moving out of the State Department altogether?
Well, I think these parents have a legitimate concern, and that's one of the reasons we've introduced CHIFF. It still maintains an important role for the State Department, but it more aligns and streamlines the actual processing of the paperwork under immigration, which should help the process go more quickly, more clearly, and that is one of the goals of CHIFF, is to address that problem, because they are correct. And you can see that because these numbers, this is State Department's numbers, have gone down. The rate of adoption has slowed, the numbers have gone down. So the purpose of introducing CHIFF is to fix that and for these numbers to start going back up. But it's important to understand that this is not just an adoption bill. This is a bill about children in families. And ideally, every child in the world should be born into a family that loves the child, that can nurture the child, and can raise the child. That is an ideal situation. We work hard and pray for that day to come, but we're a long way from there, unfortunately. So when children are born into families where they are rejected, or they are abandoned, or they are abused, the governments all over the world, with our private sector partners and with churches particularly and faith-based organizations, must do a better job of connecting those kids that have been abandoned and are unparented with families. And the point of CHIFF is to say that it should start with families. It's not starting with families now. Governments are trying to raise kids in orphanages. Governments are trying to raise children on the streets by giving them stipends for food. All of that might sound better than doing nothing, but what's the ideal is to find them a family, and that's what this bill does. So my answer would be, we're trying. We recognize that there have been some problems in the State Department, but we're going to fix that with this bill. And the reason the State Department continues to have a role, though, is because the State Department has a role in all things international. But their role will be important, but streamlined in a way that will help expedite inter-country adoptions.
Does that mean you're switching some responsibilities?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and we can give you the details. I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear, but exactly. Yeah. Anybody else? All right, and I want to also say, while it's not reflected in this scale, from about, I don't know the date, but Aaron will find it, we have increased domestic adoptions from about 15,000 20 years ago, 15, to over almost 50,000. So domestically, all of our states, our governors, our officials at the state level, and domestic policy on this, and it's been bipartisan. I mean, it's led by Democrats and Republicans. Republican governors, Democratic governors have improved the outcome for children in America, placing them in families, post-adoption services, et cetera. But why CHIFF is important? Because the opposite is happening internationally. So CHIFF is designed to turn these numbers around, to start getting better data from the State Department and from immigration services on how many children are reunited every year with families, how many children are domestically adopted, how many children are adopted through kinship, how many children are in institutions. We don't even have the basic international data necessary to accomplish the goals that I'm talking about. So CHIFF requires data collection, measurements, streamlining and shifting some responsibilities from the State Department to immigration where we think it can be processed much more quickly. All right, anybody else? Okay, thank you all very much. Thank you.